and introduce yourselves in the chat if you like. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to talk about this in a moment, but if you could keep yourselves muted for most of the time and just use the chat for communication. But we do really want to hear from you and have you ask questions and participate. So please do use that chat a lot. And also let us know if you're cooking along today. I see a lot of people are off video, which is perfectly fine. Feel free. But if you are cooking, let us know. And if not, that's totally cool. Oh, awesome, Arthur. Okay, cool. I love it when people cook along. It's so fun. But also, it's also totally fine to just watch and do it later. And I guess, Lisa, give me a thumbs up when we are good on Facebook. Okay.
We're live on Shamayim's Facebook, if y'all can take it from there.
All right. Thank you so much. So thank you everyone for being here. We're so happy to have you at our third Come Cook With Us Shabbat cooking series. And thank you to everyone watching us on Facebook. If you are watching us live and cooking along with us, let us know. We'd love to hear that. If you're watching on Facebook, we unfortunately can't see your comments and questions here, but we do have a colleague of ours who will be able to answer your comments and questions on Facebook. If you're watching here with us in the Zoom room, please put all of your comments, questions, thoughts, answers to questions, anything you think of in the chat. We so want to hear from you. If you could just keep yourself muted so that we can maximize our time with Sabrina, that would be super helpful. I see a question about where the recipe is. So if one of my amazing colleagues, thank you, Lisa. So I'm Sarah Eifler. I am the program director of Jewish Veg. We're a national nonprofit that inspires and assists Jews to adopt plant-based diets as an expression of Jewish values. And I'm so pleased and honored to be hosting this series with my colleagues. And I want to give them a moment to introduce themselves. So Lisa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. I'm Lisa Appelberg. I'm the director of Shamayim Jewish Animal Advocacy, and we help teach the Jewish community about veganism and animal advocacy through a bunch of our programs. And one of the things that we really love to do is to connect the Jewish ethical eating community, all of you, with each other. We know that when you meet each other, it's great support, great education, and a great way to keep eating against the mainstream that we know is so important and can make a big difference. So welcome, and I'm so excited about the enthusiasm in this series.
Hi everyone, I'm Lara Balsam, Director of the Jewish Vegetarian Society across the pond in England. We offer support and advice to individuals and to institutions who are moving towards a vegan diet, and it's very important for us to help people no matter where they are in their food journey. You can take a look at our website jvs.org.uk for events and recipes and features and all sorts of resources. And if you're ever in town, do visit us. We set up the first Jewish vegan centre in the world, which is in the heart of Jewish London in Golders Green. So do pop in if you're ever in the area, and I hope you enjoy the class tonight. And I'm going to hand back to Sarah.
Thanks so much, Laura. All right, so I want us to get right into it. We have a full Shabbat meal being prepared for us today by our fabulous home cook. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Sabrina Bonaparte. Sabrina lives in Seattle with her husband, her 2 tuxedo cats, and her fabulous rescue Yorkie named Fabio. She's a graduate of the Ruby Essential Vegan Desserts course and a mentor in the Challenge 22 program for new vegans. Sabrina is on the board of directors at Rooster House Rescue in Fall City, Washington. Rooster House is home to 3 beautiful Kaporo survivors and many other inspiring animal residents. In her spare time, Sabrina loves to volunteer at animal sanctuaries, and you will often find her feeding berries to turkeys. Sabrina is vegan for the animals, but went whole foods plant-based last May and has enjoyed pivoting her cooking and baking to fit a healthy vegan lifestyle. And that's what she's going to demonstrate for us today. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Sabrina.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my kitchen in Seattle. When we did a practice run with Sarah the other day, we actually had sun coming into the kitchen, and I thought we were going to have that issue again today, but then Seattle happened, and so there's no sun in my kitchen. So you won't see the glare. I just wanted to preface everything I do with saying that exactly what everyone's saying. I am a home cook. I am not a cookbook author. I am not a blogger. I am not a professional. I did take the Ruby course to learn how to bake better, but I am just like everybody out there watching, unless you are one of those things I just mentioned. And so I try to pick recipes and doing things that should be easy and accessible to everybody. Whole food plant-based cooking, as you probably know, involves a lot of chopping. I've done most of that ahead of time just so that we didn't, kind of waste time today with it. So I just want to go ahead and get started. Oh, another warning. It's 10 a.m. here, but that doesn't matter. I'm still going to eat food on camera in front of you, even though I'm making like lunch and dinner, but I'm going to eat it for breakfast because, why not? So anyway, we're going to go ahead and get started with the brownies. So the brownies are actually really interesting and easy to make. And we'll go ahead and get started here. You use your food processor. One thing I want to point out is that these ingredients, if you have, I don't know what size my food processor is, normal size, not big size, this is going to fill up this entire bowl, okay? So be careful when you do this. So we're going to start with the wet ingredients, or I guess beans are not technically wet ingredients, but they turn wet.
What kind of brownies are you making?
They're black bean brownies, fudgy raspberry brownies, I believe are what they're called. And they're a recipe from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, or PCRM. And they're big proponents of whole food plant-based eating. So I'm actually doing 2 cans of black beans, which I actually made in my Instant Pot. So if you do it from like dried beans, which is what I did, 1 can of beans is 1.5 cups of the beans that come out of your Instant Pot. So this is 2 cans of beans or 3 cups of beans for my Instant Pot. So you can see how many. It's quite a lot. The good news is you're basically eating beans for breakfast, or I ate these brownies for breakfast. Shh, don't tell anyone. And then, so it's a lot of fiber, a lot of good nutrients, a lot of protein. So then we're gonna add some dates, and here, this is a cup of dates. You can use whatever dates you want. We didn't have medjool dates in the house, but that's what I normally use if I were making this. I have my vanilla extract. It's actually clear vanilla extract. I believe there's a cat hair floating in there too. I don't know if you can see that. That's sort of inevitable in this house, but my vanilla extract's going in here. It's clear. I don't know why it's clear. I just bought it because I needed vanilla extract. And then I am using this all fruit jam. Literally all I did to make this was I had some frozen raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries in a medley, and I just cooked them down basically for about 15 minutes, and it turned into this. If you don't want to make your own jam, which is totally fine, and I have definitely made these brownies and not made my own jam, you can actually just buy raspberry jam or any strawberry jam, any sort of berry jam at the store, and throw it in here. And it's just as easy. Those tend to have more sugar in them because, the jams you buy at the store have added sugar. This has no added sugar. The only sugar is the sugar from the fruits. So, okay. Now, first round. So once you've got all the wet ingredients in here, you're going to blend it up. It's going to be loud. Sorry.
I'll mute you.
Okay. So we'll blend this up for like a couple minutes. I just want to point out, if you don't blend up the beans a lot, what you'll notice with your brownies is that you get like chunks of white things. And at first I was like, what are these white chunks? It's the inside of the bean. So you might, if you don't blend it up well, you will end up with some bean chunks in the brownie. It's not the end of the world, but it will happen. So, okay, I'm going to turn this on now.
All right, so while she's muted, I'm seeing a couple of questions that I will ask her once she's done blending. But I love that people are sharing about, loving that she's not adding any sugar and all of the kind of whole foods, plant-based way that she is making these brownies, which is what we want to demonstrate for you today with the meal that she's making, how you can make some really amazing, delicious things using totally whole foods, plant-based ingredients. So as soon as she's done blending, we'll ask her. I see a few questions in the chat that we'll make sure to ask.
Okay.
All right, Sabrina, you ready? I got some questions for you.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so we had a question about how the quantity of the frozen berries that you use for the jam.
Oh, that's a good question. I used about so I had a bag of mixed berries. I'm usually much more precise than this, let me tell you. Today, for some reason, I'm not. I had a bag of mixed berries and I just picked out everything that wasn't a strawberry in there. And I think it's about a 12-ounce bag. So I would say for both, there's some extra jam that I made here to go on top as well. We'll talk about that. I made about it was probably about 2 cups of frozen berries that I use. You can use fresh berries too. There's nothing wrong with that. I just had the frozen one. So I'm going to keep asking me questions. I'm going to keep going so we still have time. So this is just whole wheat pastry flour and cocoa powder that I'm going to throw in. And you can, if you want to make this gluten-free, you could probably use oat flour or almond flour or any other flour. I would not recommend a whole wheat flour because, as you'll see, these are actually really dense. So a whole wheat flour might make it super duper dense, but whole wheat pastry flour tends to be a little bit lighter. And so I'm just going to add the flours and the salt, if the salt comes out.
And we had a question about how you made the jam. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of cooking that down?
So the berries, they went in frozen. And then I just turned the heat on medium on my burner and just sat there. I stirred it. Well, when they're frozen, it's fine. But when they start to heat up a little, they'll start to stick. So I just sit there and stir it for about 15 minutes. And then I wouldn't recommend using the jam. Like I wouldn't make the jam and then immediately throw it in here because if you use the hot jam, it won't settle as much. So like after I made it, I just put it right in the fridge. And then as you can see, I'll show you the consistency. It's not like super duper thick. You can see it's a little tiny bit runny, but for the most part, once you put it in the fridge, it solidifies. I know you can add, if you want, you can add like lemon juice to it. I've made jam that way before. If you want to thicken it up a little bit, you can even add chia seeds if you want. I've done that before. If you don't mind some chia seeds in here, and that'll help thicken it up. But yeah, I literally just put some frozen berries in a container or in a pot and stirred it for about 15 minutes and then once I put it in the fridge, it totally solidified. So, all right, now after I've got all these ingredients in here, and you can see how full this is, I'm going to turn this back on.
Okay. If there are any questions that I missed in the chat, please feel free to repost those. And I love that we're seeing how, yes, the brownie recipe is written down. So if you have registered for this event, you should have received it in your email, and you will also receive it in the follow-up email. Also, I think we can post it into the chat so that you can look at it. You can also find it on PCRM's website, I believe. Okay. And I love how everyone is sharing the variations that they've made. I saw someone said that they did it without the fruit with nut butter. Marla said that you've added some avocado for creaminess. So there are a lot of different ways to make this. It's a very versatile recipe. So I see we're still blending. That's Brandon's hand you're seeing there. Brandon is Sabrina's partner.
Okay. I'm going to scrape down the sides a little bit just to make sure the cocoa powder gets in. Okay. Just want to make sure I'm not talking on mute. As you can see, this is very, very thick, and this is how you want it to look, right? I'm going to turn the blender on just for another like 20 seconds or so, just because I mixed in some of the cocoa powder that was stuck on the side, and then we will be ready to put it in the pan.
So again, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, any comments, and we are gonna move forward with making the brownies.
Okay, so this is really, really thick, and I want to point out a couple things. So when you put it in your pan here, the way you put it in is the way it's gonna bake, right? This is not gonna bake like traditional brownies where they're gonna rise nicely and you'll have that nice crust. They kind of turn out more like fudge. I'll show you the finished product when they're done. So if you don't care what your brownies look like, make sure you put parchment paper in here because they will stick. If you don't have parchment paper, I've used like my Silpat before because I don't always have parchment paper. I just throw it in there. It's fine. Just something to keep it from sticking. I don't personally cook with oil, but I don't think that oil would work to get this off. Like you need parchment or a Silpat or something. So I'm just dropping this in here. I'm going to make it look nicer in a minute. One other thing I want to point out is that if you look at the recipe, it called for a cup of cocoa powder. That is like a ton of cocoa powder. And it seems like it's too much, but it helps really get the chocolate flavor in there. And then you don't taste the black beans as much. And actually, like, I don't taste the black beans at all in this recipe, which is great. I do like black beans, but I also do like brownies. So it's kind of nice to not be able to taste it. So yeah.
So we had a question about, can you do this without a food processor if you don't have one?
You could, I would say you could probably do this in your blender. I would be careful in the blender because you don't want to like obliterate it and turn it into liquid. So you could probably do it in your blender. Just be careful and like maybe pulse it a little bit and keep an eye on it to make sure that you're not like, again, turning it into liquid. The thing is with the beans, you really want the beans to be pretty well chopped up. So if you were to do this by hand without any sort of machine, I think it would be difficult because as much as you mash, you might just end up with mashed bean brownies if you try and do it by hand. But yeah, you just want to make sure that the beans are really well mashed. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just spreading this out right here. And then how you top it is up to you. You can actually put it into the oven like this. I've made it like this before with absolutely no toppings whatsoever, and it just comes out as beautiful brownies and you're good. The recipe says you can top it with either jam or mini chocolate chips. I like topping it with both. It's up to you. Okay, so, and like I said, this isn't perfectly even, and this is literally exactly how it's going to come out of the oven. So even these little peaks that I've created, it's going to come out like this too, because it's more like a fudge. So I have some jam here. How does it taste, Brandon? Good. Mm-hmm. Brandon just licked my spatula. Mm-hmm. He approves. So I'm just going to put some jam here, spread it around. The jam actually bakes really nicely on top. So if you like extra jam, go ahead and spread it on there.
And that's the same jam that you used in the recipe?
Yes, it's the exact same jam. You could use a different one if you want. I personally was not going to make two different jams because that's too much work for me. And then
that was something I wanted to, sorry, go ahead.
All right, there's chocolate chips here. It calls for a half a cup. I feel like that's too much. That's just me. If you really like chocolate chips, go for it. This is only a quarter cup, and as you'll see, it pretty much covers the top very well. I'm not really good at doing this evenly, so there's probably going to be some sections of massive amounts of chocolate chips and some sections of no chocolate chips, because that's kind of how I roll. But yeah, see, this is like a quarter cup, and I feel like it's spread. I mean, it's going to come out well. So, all right, let's finish this. And then, all right. So now we have the brownies are ready to go in the oven. So the oven's preheated at 350. And I'm just going to put it in here for half an hour and set a timer. Oh, of course, my watch is going to lock on me. Set a timer for 30 minutes.
So one thing I noticed, Sabrina, is how simple that recipe is. You just put everything um, into the
Yeah.
blender. And you even said about the jam that you didn't want to do the extra work of making another one. So can you talk to us a little bit about the ways that I know you work full time and you volunteer, you do so much stuff. How do you save the time in the kitchen, especially being whole foods plant-based?
Yeah, so one of the things I do is, as you saw, I had like a big container of beans. I make beans in my Instant Pot a couple times a week. And I just here, I'll just show you, like a bag of kidney beans or black beans or even like chickpeas. I buy them dry and I put them in my, like, one Instant Pot full of black beans, for example, is enough for,
You have jam on your head, sorry.
Of course I do. Thank you. Is enough for, I think it makes about 5 or 6 cans equivalent of beans, 5 cans. So I was able to make I made like 2 pots of black beans, and I had enough for the chili, I had enough for the brownies, and then I had enough to make black bean burgers later in the week. So like making beans ahead of time, grains too, just like fill up your Instant Pot, make a bunch of brown rice, quinoa, whatever it is, whatever grain you want. You can actually freeze it too if you don't use it. Yeah.
Somebody wanted to know why you wouldn't use canned beans.
Oh, you totally can use canned beans. That's a good question. So some people are careful about their sodium intake. Canned beans, sometimes you can get them low sodium, sometimes you can't. And so the thing is with this recipe, I recommend if you do buy canned beans that you rinse them really well, because if you don't, you might get that extra salt taste. When I make beans in my Instant Pot, I literally just do beans and water, no added salt. So if you care about added salt, making your own beans is easier. I don't right now, but usually I do have canned beans in my cupboard, because sometimes I don't want to, or I don't have time to be like, I need cannellini beans. Let me go buy them at the store and then do them in my Instant Pot, because it does take a while. So canned beans are totally fine. And most recipes call for a can of beans, and then you don't have to sit there measuring them out. So yeah. And then one last hack I want to show you. In my freezer, these are vegetable scraps. So you can see onion pieces, green onions, other random veggies, carrots. So I keep all of those, and then I put those in my Instant Pot as well and make veggie broth. And that bag will probably make 9 cups of veggie broth that I can use later, and I freeze it. So I usually have freezers full of beans, greens, grains, everything. So, okay, cool. I'm gonna make the cheese sauce next. My assistant's telling me it's time to move on, so I'm moving on. All right. So anyway, does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah. I'm all about the hacks. And the other thing is, with something like this, with the chili, I'll get to the chili later, but you notice I had all the ingredients laid out on my counter. That's how I always operate. One of the things they teach you in the Ruby cooking schools is to do what's called in French mise en place, which is basically setting things up ahead of time, so that when I'm going to make these brownies, I'm not going, oh, I need a cup of cocoa powder. Let me go over and grab the cocoa powder and put that in. And then so it's no, right before I start making anything, I set all the ingredients out. You'll see it more obviously for the chili, and over here too as well. So that's another time saver, I would say. So anyway, I'm gonna make the cheese sauce next. I know in previous classes, people have asked about oil-free cheese sauce. This one is my favorite. I love doing it. It's super easy, it's super versatile. And so I'll just show you what goes in it. So the base is actually carrots and potatoes. I pre-boiled these earlier. You can see you just want to boil them so that you can stick a fork in them so that they blend easier and more quickly. Personally, I hate cooked carrots. I like raw carrots, but I hate them cooked. But in this sauce, the carrots just give it color. The potatoes make it creamy. So this is the easiest thing you'll ever do. So basically just put in the potatoes and the carrots into your blender. You could do this in a food processor too, if you don't have a good blender. And then some freshly squeezed lemon juice. Again, I measured all the the ingredients earlier. So there's nutritional yeast in here, some salt, garlic powder, onion powder, and a little bit of cayenne as well. You can omit the cayenne if you don't like spice. I happen to like spice, so I put it in here. So then you just
Sabrina,
drop
for
all.
people who may not know, could you tell us what nutritional yeast is?
Yes, it is.
It matches your sweater.
It is the color of my sweater. Yes. So it's not brewer's yeast. It does not make your bread rise. If you eat that, you will probably think it tastes terrible, but nutritional yeast is not that. It gives it this cheesy flavor. So like you're probably thinking, how do you turn carrots and potatoes into cheese? That doesn't make sense. The nutritional yeast is actually what does it. And it's like the greatest food ever. I buy it, where is it? I usually buy it like in bulk. So I get like a thing of this size. And yeah, you can see it has like macaroni and cheese. You can sprinkle it on your popcorn if you want. Just depends. Usually they're also fortified with vitamin B12, which is something that vegans don't get naturally in the foods that we eat. So it's kind of nice. I mean, I wouldn't like just eat nutritional yeast and not take a B12 supplement if you want to, but you can totally do that. And also, my cats really like nutritional yeast. Sometimes you sprinkle it on food. That's a common thing. And then, so the last thing I had, this water, you can see it's kind of cloudy. This is the water that I boiled the carrots and the potatoes in. I have a little over a cup here because I only use about 3/4 of a cup of it, but I pour a little extra just in case when I blend the cheese sauce, it's not thin enough, because sometimes it might be too thick. And sometimes depending on what you're making, you might want it to be really thin and runny. So I'm gonna pour like 3/4 of this in here. And actually, if you eat oil, you can totally make this with oil too. You can throw some oil in here. I found that it doesn't need oil. But if you're not averse to oil, you can actually put oil in the sauce as well. So then I'm gonna blend it, and this one is super loud, so mute.
So this recipe is actually something that I had asked Sabrina for at one point, because I have a partner who is allergic to raw nuts. So if you're looking for an alternative to using, a lot of the times vegan cheese sauces or vegan cheeses are made with raw cashews that you soak and blend. And that's an amazing magic trick. But this is great for anyone who has a nut allergy, that you can make this instead. So I am very fond of this recipe. Yeah, that's so true. Cashews are so great for making dishes creamier. But if you can't have them, then this potato and carrot trick is so perfect.
So actually, I think this is a little thick for me as I'm looking at it. This is what the cheese sauce looks like. Seems a little thick. It might be because I cooked my potatoes ahead of time. So I'm actually going to add the rest of the water. Here you go. Try it. Let me know how it is. Good? Okay, cool. So I'm gonna add the rest of the water, blend real quick.
This is making me really hungry.
Okay, so it's good now. I overheard, yes, you can totally use cashews in this, and it's delicious with cashews. I know a lot of people with nut allergies, so I tend not to make things with cashews. I mean, in the house I do, but if I bring it out, just because I don't want to kill anybody by accident. So like you can kind of see here, this is the consistency of the cheese sauce. You can use it, there we go. You can use it on mac and cheese. I'm gonna put on the potato. We make potato bars. Sometimes we'll just do like potatoes with broccoli and this cheese sauce on it. It's delicious. Like I said, mac and cheese, you can make nachos with it, anything you want. And it's delicious. And this amount, what I found is if we make about like a box of noodles, I think like what's that, 16 ounces of noodles. This is a good amount of sauce for that, or you can kind of use it for whatever you want. So this is great. You can make it with sweet potatoes too if you want. I use ripe potatoes, but sweet potatoes will work just fine because there's so much nutritional yeast in it that a lot of the potato, you don't get the potato flavor. So it kind of depends. Sometimes I've heard of people using, you can use oats actually too, if you want a little creamier. Just make sure if you add oats to it that you blend them up entirely, because you might get like chunks of like oatmeal in there or oats, and that's not great. But you can use oats, you can use silken tofu if you want to make it even creamier. You could also, instead of water, you can add milk if you want, like any sort of plant milk, preferably unflavored, not a vanilla one. But so there's like so many possibilities you can use to do this.
How long does it last in the fridge?
I don't know, because we've usually eaten it pretty quickly. You can actually, I bet, I've never tried it because you can freeze it. I'm assuming you can freeze it, it would be fine. It probably would last probably about a week in the fridge, I'd imagine. So yeah, you can use it for sort of whatever you want. So that's the cheese sauce. It's so easy. We make it like a couple times a week sometimes, just because it's so versatile and you can put it on anything you want. So yeah, and again, you can do that in the food processor too if you don't have a blender. So okay. Are there any other questions? That's really hot. Any other questions?
So not in the chat at the moment, but I would love to ask you about what made you decide to go whole foods plant-based, especially because I think you were vegan before that and then decided to go whole foods plant-based. So what was that process like?
So actually last May, we took a course, Brandon and I took a course through Pasado Safe Haven, which is an animal sanctuary up here that actually Brandon works at now. They were offering like this, course that was about whole foods plant-based eating, 21-day kickstart. And it was also supporting the sanctuary. So we thought, cool, like let's have some healthy eating and learn how to eat healthy and see how it goes. And so we did the course and we just loved it so much that we never stopped, actually, because we just really enjoyed the way we were eating. And we lost some weight. We weren't necessarily going into it to lose weight. That's not the only reason why you should do this, but we really thought like, this is great. We feel good. Everything's good. And, we just continued doing it. And so now we can say we're actually vegan for our health. We used to say we were vegan for the animals' health and we didn't necessarily care about our health, but we actually are now for our health as well. So that's kind of why we decided to do it. We just kind of fell into it by accident and then continued doing it, and we really enjoy it. And it's kind of fun to try and figure out like that cheese sauce. When I first learned how to make it, it was with oil, and then I was like, well, can I just sub out the oil for water? Is this going to work? And I'm like, wait, yeah, I can. Like, this is so easy. And so the food was delicious, and we just really enjoyed eating that way. So yeah,
what comment that someone uses vegetable broth instead of oil, which I know is another common substitute. I'll let you go ahead with the cooking, and then I'd love to talk more about substitutes for oil.
Yep. Okay. And so this is what I was talking about when I say I set up everything before I cook. Like these are all the ingredients for the chili, just sort of out. And so I'm going to get started making the chili. The first step is to saute the onions, garlic, and peppers. Peppers doesn't matter. Brandon hates green pepper, so I used red pepper. You can use any color pepper you want. But here's all the veggies going in. And if you notice, I just poured it straight into my pot without any oil. And oil-free cooking, at first I was kind of perplexed by it. Like, how do you saute onions without oil, right? How do you saute garlic without oil? My pan is very hot. So you
Sabrina,
can
you're not even water sauteing. You're just literally putting it straight into the pan.
Yep.
Wow.
What I start with just regular sauteing without water. And if I see things sticking, then I'll add water to it. As you can see, like a lot of mushrooms especially are super full of water. So if you put mushrooms in a pan and just go, you might not even need water or oil. So I have right here some vegetable broth that I'm going to use later on, but if I want, I can just pour a little bit in here, deglaze the pan. My pan is a little bit hotter than what I want right now, so I'm going to move it for a sec. I wanted to make sure my burner was actually on when I started this, but maybe I left it on too long. But yeah, so as you can see now, nothing is sticking, right? I just added a tiny splash of vegetable broth. You can add water. You can add, if you have extra, like if you do use canned beans, you can save the water in your beans, called aquafaba. For any beans, chickpeas, black beans, cannellini beans, any of those beans, save the water, and you can use it in the pan. You know, there's like deglazing strategies too, where I think for like, what was it that I made one? Like orzo or something, they have you pour a little bit of wine in there to deglaze the pan. You can totally do that too. But as you can see, I have a, oh, go ahead.
We had a question about why you avoid oil. What reason is there that you would not want to use oil?
Yeah, that's a great question. So oil doesn't have really any nutritional value to it. You know, like these vegetables, for example, they have fiber in them, which are really good for you. They have all sorts of vitamins, other nutrients. Oil is just calories. And it takes up a lot of room in your stomach. So like, if you think about the way that you're satiated, the way that your body knows that you're not hungry, is that your stomach is filling up. So if you
it doesn't take up room. You said it takes up a lot of room. Remember,
well,
oil's so calorically.
Oh yeah. Oil's caloric. Thank you. Oil's calorically dense, so it doesn't take up a lot of room. So your body doesn't think you're full.
Right.
So if you eat like 20 calories of oil, or you eat 20 calories of vegetables, your stomach's like, whoa, that's actually like quite a bit of vegetables versus like no oil or no room with the oil. So yeah, so that's why I kind of avoid oil. Other people have reasons as for why they would do it, but for me, it's just, it doesn't really add anything. That's the, a lot of oils, they don't really add flavor. They don't really add texture. Like I'm able to saute vegetables just fine without oil. So I don't need to add them. It just adds calories at this point.
And what I love about what you shared earlier, Sabrina, was that, this is what made you feel better and made you, feel physically more in shape and made you just, was good for you. And I think that's so important to emphasize, that everyone makes choices, especially around health, that work for them. And so, I personally am not whole foods plant-based. For people who are, it's a choice that makes them feel good about themselves. So everyone makes the choice that works best for them. And that really supports our Jewish values of being mindful and intentional around food, as well as caring for our body, which is a really important piece to the way that we live and eat in the world.
Yes, agreed. Okay, so these are pretty good. You just want to get them softened up. You can kind of see they're softened, thanks to my pot being too hot ahead of time. They cooked very quickly. So I'm going to add the spices in here. This is all the spices. I can't remember all of them. But basically you just want to pour these in and get your house basically smelling like all of these spices. You don't need to necessarily stir the vegetables as much as I did. I'm paranoid that, let's just put it this way. I used to be the type of person that would saute onions and walk away and then they'd all be stuck in the pot. So now I'm like an overstir because I'm trying to be conscious of that. But anyway, so yeah, just stir in. You can see everything's getting much darker in here. If your pan is on too high and if you don't stir enough, these spices will stick to the bottom, but that's okay because we're going to add some liquid soon. So yeah, they'll get better. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. You only need to stir that maybe like a minute or so. And then we'll add the other things. So I'll add my vegetable broth. I did just tell you all that I make my vegetable broth, and I usually do, but this week I cheated and I didn't, and I actually bought that. So don't tell anyone. And then, so in here I have black beans and kidney beans. You can use any beans you want. Whatever beans you prefer are totally great. So I'll stir those in. And then I have some frozen corn. I love corn and chili. That's like one of my favorite things. So I'm going to add the corn. Let's see.
And one
And
thing that
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Sabrina.
I'm going to add some chilies and adobo. These are spicy. If you don't like spicy, I do not recommend adding these at all because they're very, very spicy. And I add them whole. You can cut them up if you want and have them dispersed, but I like to add them whole and just like get chunks of them later and then be like, oh gosh, I forgot to put those in there. And now it's really spicy. So I like to add those for a little bit of extra spice and flavor. And then the last thing, this is actually a combination of tomato paste and canned diced tomatoes. Again, if you're looking to avoid sodium, you can get low sodium tomatoes, and those are great too. The last time I made chili, I forgot and I didn't have enough of these. So I just put regular tomatoes in and didn't put the canned ones, and those don't have as much water. So you probably want to add a little more water or vegetable broth if you do that, but you can totally use fresh tomatoes too. So I'm going to stir these and then I'm going to bring this to a boil. And then while I'm bringing this to a boil, sorry to interrupt, Sarah, you're welcome to ask me other questions. I'm just going to be watching this to make sure I don't burn it. So.
Absolutely. No, one thing that you had shared with me when we were talking about the recipes you were going to make was how this is, you know, you're making for us a cheese sauce and a chili, and you've previously made the sour cream and the potatoes, and then you made brownies, and this is more than you would normally make during the week. This is a special Shabbat meal. So can you talk a little bit about, like, you know, what makes it special to cook like this for Shabbat, and then how do you cook the rest of the week to kind of keep the time down on that you're in the kitchen?
Well, the good news is that we're going to be eating this food for probably like 4 days because the chili, like that's why I like Shabbat, because I can just kind of cook all day on Friday, and then we can eat whatever variety of the Shabbat meal on Friday, and then on Saturday we can eat a different variety. So, like for example, right after this, we're going to eat lunch, and we're going to have the potato bar that I'm making. So we'll have baked potatoes with the sour cream and the chili and the cheese sauce. And then yesterday, Brandon made some extra noodles. So for dinner, we'll probably have some mac and cheese, right? Because we have the cheese sauce left over. And then tomorrow we might have like bowls of chili, just with a little bit of sour cream on them, and maybe a little bit of, you know, green onions and cilantro on top. And then, you know, Sunday we might make a shepherd's pie, just mash up some potatoes, put it on top of the chili and go. So it's the reason why I like cooking like this is because it's kind of like we can eat different, like the same food over and over again, but in totally different ways. And so I'm going to spend all this time cooking today, but then it pays off like later on, because then I don't have to cook for like half the weekend or maybe the whole weekend. Who knows? This makes quite a bit of chili. I believe the last batch I made, we ate it, 3 times? Yeah. So it was like 6 servings of chili. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's like you put in the work on Shabbat, but then you're sort of rewarded other days. And the brownies, they're supposed to be 16 servings. We ate them pretty quickly last time. So just sort of depends on what you consider a serving to be, but they're supposed to be 16 pieces each. So yeah, so that's kind of like what so it's okay. I mean, if you think about it too, like it's not like you're eating a traditional brownie that has like sugar, like white sugar or brown sugar and oil and all these other things. You're eating, like, you saw what went in there, right? It was basically like dates and fruit as a sweetener, and then a lot of black beans. Like 2 cans of black beans is a lot of black beans. So it's not, I don't really necessarily feel guilty about eating them that quickly. So yeah, so basically, like, you know, if I go like big on Shabbat, which I like doing, then other days I can just kind of relax and get creative with the leftovers.
I have a question.
Yes.
Somebody I just saw pop up. This is Brandon speaking for those who are wondering who's talking. Somebody wanted to know, do we go to restaurants before you move on? Can you tell us, like, do you eat out?
Yes, that is a fantastic question. So there's actually one restaurant right up the street from us that is, I'm going to call it like 90% compliant. They might like dress their kale in a little bit of oil, but the rest of their menu is all whole food, plant-based, and very compliant. They have juices and bowls and all sorts of other things. So if we want to like quickly get a meal, we'll probably go there. We kind of do this thing, we call them treat meals. So, you know, we're always vegan, regardless of what, you know, we might not be entirely whole food plant-based all the time, but we're always vegan. So if we're having a treat meal, it might be like a vegan burger and some fries and a shake or something like that. So generally our rule is like once every 14 days or so, we'll treat ourselves to a treat meal. If it's a special occasion, we might do it an extra time or whatever. But yeah, so we do still eat at restaurants. It's been a struggle during the pandemic because like, I'm like, I don't want to see my favorite vegan restaurants close. So I have to support them. So, you know, I do, you know, feel the need to go out and eat, not to restaurants, but like we bring in takeout because I definitely want to make sure that I'm supporting the vegan restaurants around me. But yeah, so our treat meals are always vegan. They're not always whole food, plant-based, no oil, but that's okay. And basically like when we go to a restaurant, we have a burger and fries and we're like, oh my gosh, that was delicious. And then the next day we just jump back to eating like this again. And it's, you know, pretty easy. And I think most of the people I know who are like that, it's very difficult to eat out whole food, plant-based, no oil. I don't actually know of any restaurant at all that serves that kind of food that would be like 100% compliant. So I'm just gonna make sure. Okay, we're getting close to boiling here, but not entirely.
Lisa wanted to know, did your timer on your watch go off yet?
Not yet. I know everyone wants to see the brownies. Just want to make sure it's still working. Are there other questions?
There was one about the chilies and adobo. How do you store those after you open it?
Yeah, so you can store these in the fridge if you want, if you're going to use them right away. They look like this. If you're going to use them right away, you can store them in the fridge, but they will mold and they will spoil. So you have to use them within probably like 4 or 5 days, but you can actually freeze them and they freeze really, really well. I usually freeze them because I only use them for chili and I only use a couple because they're really spicy. And so I've made the mistake of putting like 5 in and then being like, oh my gosh, I can't feel my eyeballs because they're burning right now. So yeah, you can, I would recommend freezing them unless you're going to use them right away. So
I have a question about them. If someone in your household does not like spice and you do, can you like put them in your individual bowl? Like how do you spice up things differently per serving?
Yeah, you can. When I put them in the chili, they tend to break up a little bit so that you're not eating like a whole chili. I believe they're actually jalapenos, like that's the actual chili. And you know, with jalapenos, sometimes you get one and you're like, this is good. And sometimes you get one and you're like, oh my gosh, fire, right? And so like, because it's a whole can, you don't know if you're going to get a fire one or just a normal one. So I would say you can put one in your bowl, but I would recommend chopping it up first because you don't want to take a whole bite out of it, because if it's a really spicy one, you're going to regret that. You can also like, I put cayenne in here. I like cayenne. You can put hot sauce. I wouldn't put the hot sauce in the chili till after it's done cooking. But you know, you can put hot sauce in your bowl. Chili flakes are always good too, right? So you could do that separately. We like heat in our house, so I just spice everything up.
Someone is asking about the steamed potatoes, and I think since you're using potatoes for both the cheese sauce and your chili, there might be some confusion. The question was, should they be cut up? And clearly they are cut up. Are these potatoes going into the chili? I just want to make sure before someone puts them in the blender, because I think there's two things going on.
Yes. Good question. So yeah, okay, this is boiling enough, so I'm going to turn it down. And that's actually when the potatoes go in. So there's two kinds of potatoes in the recipe. These are steamed. And again, you can use regular potatoes or white potatoes or sweet potatoes, or if you don't like one or the other, just double it up. So these go in here now. And these I steamed. So I used, you know, like my steamer basket and steamed them. The potatoes that I put in the cheese sauce, I actually boiled those and saved some of the water as like the leftover water to add to thin out the cheese sauce. But these are actually steamed. You could totally boil these too if you prefer. It just depends on, I mean, you don't even have to steam them or boil them. You can actually roast them if you want. You can put them in your oven. I would say for the cheese sauce, you have to boil those potatoes just because you need the additional water. But for the chili, you just need to cook the potatoes before you put them in here. Oh, my watch is going off. Okay, so the next step is you're gonna want this to cook for about 5 more minutes on the stovetop once you've added the potatoes. If your potatoes are a little undercooked, you might wanna leave them longer, but I made sure that those were fully steamed. So yeah, so there's 2 sets of potatoes, one that goes in the cheese sauce and one that goes in the chili. And my watch is going off. So let's take a look. I should probably use a glove so I don't burn myself. And I'm gonna pull out. So
I do see a great question in the chat. As we only have about 10 minutes left, I want to give Sabrina time to show us the finished product. And then if there's time, we will ask more questions.
okay. So these need about 2 more minutes. That you can see this came out. It's not totally clean. You want it to come out mostly clean. Also, pro tip, don't leave your oven open this long because it's actually pulling out all your heat. So, all right. So everything is, these guys will go for about 2 more minutes. I forgot to take them out. I'm gonna pull them out of the fridge, but I have the finished brownies. So this is what they look like in the end. You can see I've got the jam on the top and the chocolate chips. Again, you don't have to put either of them on there if you don't want to. They do look more like fudge. You can kind of see they're not cakey at all. They're more like fudgy. The good thing about that is you're not supposed to eat them when they're warm because they're, you want them to fully cook, right? But you can totally eat them while they're warm and the consistency is going to be the same. You don't need to wait for them to get cakey or anything like this. And I would store the brownies in the fridge because the jam, depending on how warm your kitchen is, the jam might start to like slide off a little bit if you don't. And also, it's beans, so you should probably want to store them in the fridge. I'm not sure how long, these probably would last about 5 or 6 days, I'm guessing, in the fridge if you store them in there, but they won't last that long in our house. In our house, they'll last about maybe 2 to 3 days tops. Yep. Okay. So that's what the finished brownies will look like. When I pull them out, I'll show you. You want to leave them sort of in the pan for a little bit longer so that they can fully finish baking. And then you'll just lift the parchment out when they're ready and put them on your counter. Or if you have like a rack, you can put it on that to let them finish completely cooling. Okay. So I'm gonna move on just to see if we can get everything plated up by the end. I have some baked potatoes here that I made. I made just 1 white potato and 1 sweet potato. And of course I picked a white sweet potato. So it looks exactly like the other potato. I was trying to show the difference between the two, but I did not. And then I have this sour cream here that I made. I wanted to make it on camera, but I didn't think I'd be able to clean out my food processor quickly enough to be able to do it. But this is sour cream that's whole food, plant-based, no oil. It's made from this box that it's like silken tofu. You just put the silken tofu in your blender with some lemon juice and some red wine vinegar. If you don't like one or the other, you could double up. You want that to give it a little bit of tang. And then you can add as much salt as you want. I generally add just a little bit, but you can add more salt. You don't have to put any salt in if you don't do salt or you don't want to. This, because it's made with tofu, if you put it in your fridge, you might notice it gets a little watery after a couple days. That's totally fine. Tofu does that. It sweats. So it's not a big deal. Mine was a little watery. So you just, stir it a bit and then it's great. So I'm going to show you, just gonna, here it is. Get a potato going here. This chili might be, it's probably 99% done. So we're gonna go with it. So that's kind of what the chili looks like in the end. If you think it's too watery, I've actually seen recipes where you can add a little bit of what's the English word for masa harina? Corn, not cornstarch. Corn, help me out here.
Semolina? No.
Yeah, like a semolina, basically. You can add a little bit of semolina. You could add some flour too if you want to thicken it up a bit. It's going to thicken up over time. So you can also just kind of wait a little bit. So I'm just going to pour the chili on here. It seems kind of weird. We're like overdoing the potatoes because I'm putting like potato chili on potatoes. And then I'm going to put cheese sauce, which is made out of potatoes, on the potatoes. So it's like, does it feel like kind of cannibalism-y? I don't know. I guess not, because the potatoes aren't eating themselves. So that's not cannibalism. So anyway, and then let's just take that out. Pour a little bit of cheese sauce on here. And now you can see what the cheese sauce looks like when we pour it out.
Yummy.
Whoop. Okay. And then, excuse me, Brandon, put a little bit.
Someone said they look like potato hot dogs.
I noticed that they do. And then just drop some of the sour cream on here. You can add roasted vegetables to this. In the picture, I had some broccoli and cauliflower, and I fully intended to have that today, but we accidentally ate it the other day, and I didn't have a chance to go get any more. So no broccoli and cauliflower. That's my punishment for eating all the food in the house. So let me pull this out of here. 2 gloves for this. All right, this is done now. So now you can see the chocolate chips melt a little bit on top, which is pretty nice. You can see a little bit of the jam that's kind of on top there that's soaked in. And these take a while to cool. They probably take about a good 45 minutes before they're fully cool. If you want to cool them faster, like I said, just lift them out of here like that with the parchment and put them, on a cookie rack. So you could do that as well. And then, yeah, you have your brownies. And
They look so amazing, Sabrina. Everyone in the chat is saying how good they look. Arthur shared that the cheese sauce tastes delicious. So thank you so much for cooking a full Shabbat meal for us today. It has been such an honor and a pleasure to have you and Brandon involved and making this for us. And I wish I were eating that right now too. For everyone who is watching us on Facebook, thank you so much for joining us. For those of you who have joined us today on Zoom, we're so happy to have you here. We will send you, everyone who's registered for this event, you will get a follow-up email with all of the recipes, as well as links to follow our 3 organizations, Jewish Veg, Shamayim Jewish Animal Advocacy, and the Jewish Vegetarian Society in the UK. You can find all of our events and programs. Jewish Veg has a program called Plant Pathways that Sabrina is a member of. So if you want to see more of her recipes and amazing tips and advice, you can join us there. And I know Lisa and Shamayim have an amazing retreat coming up this weekend that you should check out. Jewish Vegetarian Society does a ton of different events and programs. Please follow all of us on social media and our websites, and you will see all of that in the follow-up email. We are so happy to be continuing this series with you. We love having you here with us. And an early Shabbat Shalom. Thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you so much to Sabrina for everything that you did to make this event so much fun.
And since we've somehow pulled it off with 1 minute to go, someone said in the chat how impressed they were with the time. And I can't agree more. When Sabrina told us what she was trying to do, we just thought it was so ambitious, and she's done it. So this is the way to do it in a full Shabbat meal in 1 hour.
So eating the broccoli paid off, because maybe that broccoli would have put me a minute over.
that would have hit you over. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you, Sabrina. Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to stop the recording.
Thank you.